Hello students, in the last class we read the chapter 4, The Enemy, and we were reading page number 35, and today we are going to continue with the same page number 35, maybe the third paragraph. Till now we have already read that Dr. Sadao was trying to operate the American soldier, and he made an effort to save his life, and somehow he was able to get the bullet out of the patient's body, and he was quite happy with his effort. This is page number 35 now. It is not quite at the kidney, my friend. Sadao's, it was his habit that whenever he was doing an operation, or he was medicating a patient, he was always calling his patient as friend. So Sadao murmured in a very low voice. It was his habit to murmur to the patient when he forgot himself in an operation. Means Dr. Sadao was such a man that when he was operating, or he was giving treatment to somebody, he really got dissolved or maybe absorbed in his own work. Then he was calling him my friend. He always called his patients, and so now he did, forgetting that this was his enemy. Then quickly, with the cleanest and most precise of incisions, incision here means that he, with the help of knives or maybe with the help of some instruments, he was trying to get the to cut the skin, and he was trying to get the bullet out. The man quivered, but he was still unconscious. The man was quivering means he was moving, he was trembling because of pain, but he was still unconscious. Nevertheless, he muttered a few English words, but the man, the American, he was able to speak something. Though he was unconscious, but when he was suffering a lot of pain, he actually spoke some of the English words. And what were those English words? Were guts. The patient was saying guts, they got my guts, means he was actually trying to tell that it was really painful when the bullet was getting out of the body, when Dr. Sadao was operating on him. He muttered and he choked also, means the patient was suffocated at that time. Sadao, Hana cried sharply, but Hana was crying because she couldn't bear that pain. She could not see patient going through such pain. But Sadao asked her to keep quiet. Hush means to keep quiet. The man sank again into silence so profound that Dr. Sadao took up his wrist, hating the touch of it. Means the man was actually going through a lot of pain, and then he became silent, so profound that Sadao took up his wrist, because the man became very silent after that. So Dr. Sadao had a suspicion, he had a doubt, he wanted to see whether the man was still alive or not, hating the touch of it. Yes, there was still a pulse, so faint, but Dr. Sadao noticed that there was pulse, the pulse was moving, means his patient, that American, was still alive, but he was really, the pulse was fainted, means it was still very, you can say, slow. So feeble, feeble here means weak, but enough. It means he was still alive. If he wanted the man to live, to give hope, means still he had hope that the man would get survived. But certainly I do not want this man to live, he thought. Now this is really ironical. This is really ironical, because Dr. Sadao was doing everything to save the life of the man, and when he saved it, so he was asking himself why that man should live, why he was not dying. So this is really ironical. This shows that Dr. Sadao and Hana, they were really confused what should be done. No more anesthetic, he told Hana. He turned as swiftly, swiftly means very quickly, as though he had never paused, and from his medicines he chose a small vial. Vial here means a kind of small tumbler. एक छोटी सी शीशी को बोला जाता है vial. So he actually got that vial, and from it filled a hypodermic, and hypodermic here means syringe. So he took a syringe, he actually filled the injection in it and thrust means he put it into the patient's left arm. So he gave an injection to the patient, to the American, just to strengthen his body. Then putting down the needle, he took the man's wrist again. Again he took the wrist because he wanted to check the pulse. The pulse under his fingers fluttered. Fluttered means it was moving, you can say flutteringly. It was moving irregularly once or twice and then grew stronger. Means with the help of that injection, he actually strengthened the condition of the patient. This man will live in spite of all. And at last, Dr. Sadao said again, he said this to Hana, and he said that this man is never going to die because he was such a strong personality that even though he had gone through so many wounds and injuries, but he still was able to survive. The young man woke so weak, his blue eyes so terrified when he perceived where he was. Now, what is the meaning of this line? The young man means that American, he woke up and he was very weak, and when he noticed that he was somewhere else, he did not know where he was, he got terrified. Terrified means he was really frightened, and with fear he looked at the people who were there near him. When he perceived means he noticed where he was, that Hana felt compelled to apologize. And when Hana noticed that the man was really, you can say, unhappy and sad and maybe frightened also, he was worried. So Hana actually felt very apologizing. She started apologizing that he should not feel like this. She herself served him, for none of the servants would enter the room. This is very important because Hana was the woman. Hana came forward, even though the servants, they really refused to help the masters and the American. And now Hana, just to help her husband, she came forward and she was preparing food, she was serving food to the American and doing everything. The household work was being done by her only now. When he came in the first time, she came in the first time, she saw him summon his small strength to be prepared for some fearful thing. Means when Hana first of all went into the American's room, she noticed that American, that prisoner of war, he was trying to do something. He was collecting his strength. He was trying to get up out of the bed. Don't be afraid, she begged him softly. But Hana tried to console him, and she said that he should not be afraid and he was safe, in safe hands. How come you speak English? He gasped. And at last, that American, he was pretty confused, that because Hana was a Japanese, but she could speak English so well. So he actually wanted to ask her that how she could speak such good English. Don't be afraid, she begged him softly. But the woman said that he should not be afraid. And how come you speak English? I was a long time in America, she replied. So Hana told him that she was in America for some time and that is why she could speak English. She saw that he wanted to reply to that, but he could not, and so she knelt and fed him gently. This is very important. She was feeding him. She really disliked the idea to stay or stand near this American, but now she was feeding the same person from the porcelain spoon. Porcelain here means made of china clay. Ceramic material would be called as porcelain. So with the help of that china clay, you can say cups and spoons, she tried to feed him. And she was just standing near him, and she also noticed that he wanted to reply, he wanted to speak something, but he could not because of the weakness. He was so weak that he couldn't speak. He ate unwillingly, and the American did not want to eat, but unwillingly he ate something, but still he ate. Now you will soon be strong, she said, not liking him and yet moved to comfort him. Again, this is very important. Hana disliked the Americans. All the Americans were disliked by Hana and her husband. Now you will soon be strong, but still she was trying to sympathize with him. She was trying to console him. She was trying to show her sympathy to this man, but not liking him. She did not like him and she did not want to comfort him at all. He did not answer after that. When Sadao came in the third day after the operation, he found the young man sitting up, his face bloodless with the effort. This is again very important because On the third day, when they actually had given shelter to this man, after 3 days, Dr. Sadao found the young man sitting up. He found that the young man, this American, he was trying to sit up, and his face became bloodless because he was still very weak and he could not sit properly. So Dr. Sadao came inside the room and he asked him to lie down. And he also said that, do you want to die? Because it was really, you can say, very risky for him to stay and sit properly. Because of his weakness, he had to take some rest. He could not sit. He forced the man down gently and strongly and examined the wound. And examine here means he again checked the wound, the injuries. You may kill yourself if you do this sort of thing. And Dr. Sadao warned him that he should not do anything silly like this, and he should not try to move his body because he was so weak that he should stay. He should keep himself quiet and he should take some rest only. He should not try to get up. What are you going to do with me? The boy muttered. Boy here means that American. At last, the American soldier, he asked Dr. Sadao that what was their plan, what they were going to do with him. He looked just now barely 17, and the young man this American was so young that he looked just 17 years old at that time. Are you going to hand me over? He asked Dr. Sadao. He asked him that Dr. Sadao was going to do with him. Was he be going to be, you can say, handed over to the police by Dr. Sadao? For a moment, Sadao did not answer, but Sadao actually did not want to give any answer to these questions. And he kept himself quiet. He finished his examination and then pulled the silk quilt over the man. I do not know myself what I shall do with you. This is very important. This shows the dilemma. This shows the doubt inside the mind of Dr. Sadao. Dr. Sadao said that he himself did not know what he actually wanted to do with this American. What is going to happen to him? He said, I ought of course to give you to the police. Means why he has used ought here? Because ought generally means your moral obligation. His moral responsibility as a Japanese was to hand him over to the police. You are a prisoner of war means POW, and no, do not tell me anything means Dr. Sadao refused to listen to his views. He actually did not want to ask anything about this man. But according to Dr. Sadao, his duty was to hand him over to the police as a Japanese. He put up his hands as he saw the young man was about to speak. But when Dr. Sadao noticed that the young man was American, wanted to speak something, he put his hands on the lips of that American. Do not even tell me your name unless I ask. Means Dr. Sadao stopped him from telling him anything, and he did not want to listen to this man. They looked at each other for a moment, and then the young man closed his eyes and turned his face to the wall. And he whispered, means the young man, this American whispered, okay. His mouth a bitter line. Bitter line means he looked very pale and very weak. Outside the door, Hana was waiting for Sadao. He saw at once that she was in trouble. Means when Dr. Sadao came out of the room, he noticed that Hana was waiting for him, and he also noticed that that his wife Hana was in trouble. She was troubled. She was really worried about something. Sadao, Yumi tells me the servants feel they cannot stay if we hide this man here anymore. She said. Means Hana told this fact to the husband Sadao, and she told him that all the servants, they were not ready to stay in the presence of the young man. If this American would be given shelter anymore by Sadao and Hana to their house, then these servants, they were planning to move away. They wanted to leave the house. She tells me that they are saying that you and I were so long in America that we have forgotten to think of our country first. They think we like Americans. Now this is very important line. Actually, this is a blame on Dr. Sadao and Hana. Hana was told by the servants that they felt that because they were giving shelter to an American, maybe because they had you can say, lived for more than 8 years continuously in America, they would have some sympathy for all the Americans, and that is why maybe they liked Americans, and Hana and Dr. Sadao wanted to save the life of this man because of their liking for Americans. It is not true, Dr. Sadao said harshly. But Dr. Sadao, after listening to these views, he became very harsh and he bluntly said that it was not true because they did not like Americans at all. Americans are our enemies. He told this fact to Hana that all the Americans were their enemies, but I have been trained not to let a man die if I can help it. Means because he was a doctor, it was taught to him that his first and foremost duty as a doctor was to save a life. That is why he was saving the life of this man. Otherwise, there was no other reason. The servants cannot understand that, she said anxiously. Anxiously means again very worried she was. And she said the servants cannot understand that. Means the servants, they were not ready to hear, listen, all these things. And he agreed, no. Neither seemed able to say more. Means nobody wanted to speak more on this topic now. Means Hana and Dr. Sadao, they wanted to be to keep themselves quiet. And somehow the household dragged on. Somehow the household work, you can say, dragged on. Means it actually the family went on with the same routine. The servants grew more watchful, and now all the servants, they were very watchful. They were refusing to do anything for that American. Their courtesy was as careful as ever. Maybe their courtesy means their politeness, their friendliness with Hana and Sadao was still as careful as ever, but their eyes were cold upon the pair to whom they were hired. But now they were not so, you can say, they were not showing their affection and love to the pair, to Hana and Sadao. It is clear what our master ought to do, the old gardener said one morning. And one morning, old gardener said this to all the people of the house, that it was very much clear that what their master here means Hana and Sadao, what their master ought to do means what they should do. He had worked with flowers all his life, and he had been a specialist too in moss. Now this is something about the gardener. Gardener was there, you can say, living all his life with Dr. Sadao and his father, and he was, you can say, doing a lot of things for them for last so many years, and he was a specialist too in moss. For Sadao's father, he had made one of the finest moss gardens, and because he was hired by Dr. Sadao's father, so for Sadao's father, this gardener had made a very beautiful moss garden also. He had created it in Japan, sweeping the bright green carpet constantly so that not a leaf or a pine needle marred the velvet of its surface. And he had created a very beautiful green carpet in the garden also. My old gardener, master's son, knows very well what he ought to do. Now, this gardener, he gave a very critical comment on Dr. Sadao, and he said that he knew, means Dr. Sadao knew what was good and what was bad for him. He knew better than anybody else, he now said, pinching a bud from a bush as he spoke. When the man was so near death, why did he not let him bleed? Means the gardener actually wanted to know that when the American was so near his death, why he was being supported and helped by Dr. Sadao. According to gardener, Dr. Sadao should let him die. उसको मरने देना चाहिए, डॉक्टर सदाओ को उसकी हेल्प नहीं करनी चाहिए. That young master is so proud of his skill to save life that he saves any life, the cook said. But there was a cook, and she actually said that maybe because Dr. Sadao was really boasting of himself, he really had so much, you can say, he was having so much pride in himself that he could save anybody's life. So just for his fake pride, he was actually saving the life of anybody, and he wanted to show that he could save anybody's life. This was said by the cook, said contemptuously. Contemptuously means with hatred, she said this. She split a fowl's neck. Fowl here means a bird which would be kept for only for flesh. So a fowl, she actually cut the neck of a fowl, of a bird, very skillfully, and held the fluttering bird and let its blood flow into the roots of a wisteria vine. So there was a wisteria vine, वहाँ पर एक बेल थी, and because any you can say bird's blood is very helpful in the growth of a plant, so she did not want to waste it, and she was trying to pour all the you can say all the blood into the roots of the wisteria vine. Blood is best fertilizers, and she knew that blood was one of the best fertilizers, and the old gardener would not let her waste a drop of it. And the old gardener had given her instructions that whenever she would cut a fowl, she should not drop even a you can say single drop of blood anywhere else but into the wisteria vine. It is the children of whom we must think, Yumi said sadly. And then Yumi, another maid servant, she also was showing her concern, and she said that at least the couple, means Dr. Sadao and Hana, they should think about their children, or the safety of the children. What will be their fate, means what would happen to these children if their father is condemned as a traitor, if Dr. Sadao would be captured by the army because he was helping a prisoner of war, then what would happen? What would be the fate of the children? Because Dr. Sadao could be condemned, could be captured or found guilty as a traitor. Traitor here means betrayer. Betrayer का मतलब होता है देश को धोखा देने वाला. Betrayer. They did not try to hide what they said from the ears of Hana as she stood arranging the day's flowers in the veranda nearby. And she knew they spoke on purpose that she might hear. Now this is very important. All these servants, they were not trying to hide anything from the master. They were actually intentionally speaking all the things very loudly. Why? Because the servants, they wanted that all these things should be overheard or heard by Hana or by Dr. Sadao, because they did not want to, you can say, hide anything from them. They wanted that Hana or Dr. Sadao should listen to all these views. That they were right, she knew too in her most of her being. And this is very important. Maybe Hana also realized that whatever was being said by the servants, it was true. But there was another part of her which she herself could not understand. It was not sentimental liking of the prisoner. She had come to think of him as a prisoner. She had not liked him even yesterday when, this is page number 38, when he had said in his impulsive way, "Anyway, let me tell you that my name is Tom." Means she was not having any kind of affection for that American, but still she did not know why she was helping this man. And in a very, you can say, thoughtless manner, one day, this man, this American, started speaking to Hana, and he was trying to tell a lot of things about himself, and he told her that his name was Tom. "Anyway, let me tell you that my name is Tom." And the American told this to Hana, that his name was Tom, and she only bowed her little distant bow. Means she just heard it and wanted to avoid all such things. She saw hurt in his eyes, but she did not wish to assuage it. She noticed that the man was really hurt, that the man was really going through a lot of suffering, but she did not want to speak to him because she did not want to assuage. Assuage here means reduce or soften. She did not want to reduce the pain of this man because he was an American. Indeed, he was a great trouble in the house. She knew that because of the presence of this man in the house, all the people, servants, Dr. Sadao, Hana, their children, they were at risk, and they were really going through a lot of trouble or problem. As for Sadao, every day he examined the wound carefully. The last stitch, means every day Sadao was coming and he was trying to have a careful watch on the you can say wounds. He was trying to investigate the wounds. He wanted to go through the checkup. The last stitches had been pulled out this morning, and the young man would, in a fortnight, be nearly as well as ever. What is the meaning of fortnight? Fortnight means 14 days. 2 weeks collectively are called as fortnight. So Dr. Sadao came, and after taking out the last some stitches, he actually gave a comment. He said that maybe in 15 days or 14 days or in a fortnight, the man would be fit as ever. He would become healthy. Dr. Sadao went back to his office and carefully typed a letter to the chief of police reporting the whole matter. Now, this is very important because one day Dr. Sadao made up his mind, and now he did not want to go through such pain or dilemma or suspicion or doubt. So what he made up his mind, and he started typing a letter which was addressed to chief of police. To police, he wanted to give the information about Tom, about this American, and he wanted to hand him over to the police. On the 21st day of February, an escaped prisoner was washed up on the shore in front of my eyes, on my house. Means he started the letter like this, that on 21st of the February, just in front of his house, there was a man who was washed ashore by the sea waves. So far he typed, and then he opened a secret drawer of his desk and put the unfinished report into it. But after that he hesitated, or he stopped himself, and he put that unfinished report, unfinished letter was put inside a secret drawer. उसने अपने secret drawer में वो unfinished letter रख दिया because he did not want to finish it. Now this is very, very, very important. The seventh day. Seventh day is very important. On the seventh day, after that, means they had given shelter to this man a week ago. So on the seventh day, two things happened. In the morning, the servants left together. Means on the seventh day, what actually happened? Two different things happened. And what are these two different things? Number one, first of all, during that seventh day's morning, the servants, they left the house. They went away. And their belongings tied in large square cotton kerchiefs. Kerchiefs here means maybe a blanket or maybe a bed sheet kind of thing. And these servants, they put their clothes inside, and they tied a kerchief, they tied a cloth, and they were packing their luggage. They wanted to go away. They were not ready to stay anymore in the presence of that American. When Hannah got up in the morning, nothing was done. Means, what is the meaning of nothing was done? No household work was done. And she came to know that maybe the servants, they had made up their mind to leave the house. The house was not cleaned and the food not prepared, and she knew what it meant. She was dismayed. Now, what is the meaning of dismayed? She was very disappointed. So she was dismayed or disappointed, and even terrified also. Terrified means she was worried. And why she was worried? But her pride as a mistress would not allow her to show it. Means she was dismayed, she was disappointed, sad, and terrified also. But she did not want to show her fear to the servants. And because of that pride as a mistress, she tried to hide her fear. Instead, she inclined her head gracefully when they appeared before her. And just because she wanted to show that she was the mistress of the house, wo malkin hai ghar ki, she wanted to hide all her fear. And she actually, with a lot of grace, tried to speak to these servants. And she paid them off. And she actually gave them their dues also, and thanked them for all they had done for her. They were crying. Now this is very important. All the servants were crying because they were really not happy to leave the house. They really wanted to stay there, but because they could not stay in the presence of that American, they disliked his presence. So they had made up their mind to leave them, but they did not want to go away. But she did not cry. Means the servants were crying, but she could not cry because she had to, because her pride as a mistress was, you can say, stopping her from doing this. and she resisted herself from speaking or showing her weakness to the servants. The cook and the gardener had served Sadao since he was a little boy. This cook and the gardener, they were serving Dr. Sadao's family when he was a little boy, and Yumi cried because of the children. And this Yumi, why she was crying? Because she really liked the children and she did not want to leave them alone. She was so grieving that after she had gone, she ran back to Hana. She was so grieving. Grieving means she was so sad and she was really disappointed, full of pain she was, that she ran back to the house after going out. And she said, if the baby misses me too much tonight, send for me. What is the meaning? Yumi told Hana that if the children would be missing her at night, she was ready to come back and console them. She was ready to come at night for the sake of the children because she liked the children so much. I am going to my own house, and you know where it is. Means she actually wanted to tell Hana that Hana knew what was the address of Yumi. But Hana said smilingly, thank you. But she told herself she would not send for Yumi. However, the baby cried. But Hana was such a stubborn lady that she actually promised herself that she would never call Yumi. Even maybe the children would be missing her, but she would not call Yumi ever. She made the breakfast and Sadao helped with the children. Now, this was their strength. Dr. Sadao and Hana may be alone with each other. They were supporting each other and they were without being helped by the servants, because the servants, they had deserted them. So now they were preparing the breakfast and all the other things were being done by Dr. Sadao and Hana together. Neither of them spoke means Dr. Sadao and Hana, neither here means not nor Dr. Sadao or neither Hana, they spoke of the servants beyond the fact that they were gone. Means they did not want to discuss anything about the servants now. But after Hana had taken morning food to the prisoner, she came back to Sadao. Means after serving the food to the patient, Hana came back and she said, why is it that we cannot see clearly what we ought to do? Now this is again very important. Hana wanted to ask from Dr. Sadao that why they cannot see what was seen and noticed by the servants. Servants knew that everything which was being done by Hana and Sadao was really bad on their part, or maybe it was really risky, and that is why they had left the house. So why they were, you can say, more educated and they were in a better position than the servants, then why they could not see the reality? She asked him. Even the servants see more clearly than we do. Means servants are having better point of view and perception than Dr. Sadao and Hana. Why are we different from other Japanese? And she said that what was that? Why they were different from the other Japanese, and why were they were behaving in a different way than the other servants were doing? Sadao did not answer, but Sadao did not want to answer all these things. But a little after, he went into the room where the prisoner was and he said brusquely. Now this is very important. Brusquely means in a very abrupt way. Abrupt means in a very rude and rough way, he said. Means Dr. Sadao went to the room of the prisoner and he said, today, this is page number 39. Today you may get up on your feet. I want you to stay up only 5 minutes at a time. Tomorrow you may try it twice as long. It would be well that you get back your strength as quickly as possible. Dr. Sadao went to the American's room and he asked him to stand for 5 minutes that day, and after that day, every day he needed to prolong the stay. He needed to get his strength back. He needed to get fit as early as possible, according to Dr. Sadao, because Dr. Sadao actually wanted this man Tom to leave the house as soon as possible. He saw the flicker of terror on the young face that was still very pale. And Dr. Sadao at the same time noticed that the young man, this patient, was really full of fright. He was really terrified. Okay, the boy murmured. And this boy, this prisoner of war, this American said, okay, sir. Evidently, he was determined to say more. He actually wanted to speak something more. And he said, I feel I ought to thank you, doctor, for having saved my life. And at last, Dr. Sadao was being thanked by this man. Means American was trying to say thanks for whatever was being done or had been done by Dr. Sadao to save his life. Don't thank me too early. But Dr. Sadao, in a very cold way, he said that he should not be thanked so early because he means the American's life was still not saved. And he saw the flicker of terror again in the boy's eyes. And then Dr. Sadao noticed that the young man or that American was full of terror again. Terror as unmistakable as an animal's. The scars on his neck were crimson. Crimson means got reddened. मतलब उसके जो जख्म थे, they got reddened for a moment. They became red. Those scars, what were they? Dr. Sadao did not ask. But Dr. Sadao, even though he noticed that there were so many scars, so many scratches were there on the body of the American, but he did not want to ask anything about it. He just ignored all these things. In the afternoon, the second thing happened. Now, in the last page, we noticed that on the seventh day, the first thing happened that all the servants, they left the house. And what was the second thing on the seventh day? This is the second thing. And what was that second thing? Hannah, working hard on unaccustomed labor, saw a messenger come to the door in official uniform. Her hands went weak and she could not draw her breath. Means Hannah noticed she was actually working hard. Unaccustomed labor means she was not accustomed, she was not used to do a lot of labor because the servants had left the house. Now she had to do a lot of work, and she noticed that there was a messenger who came in official uniform, and she got frightened because she thought that maybe the servants had told something about the shelter that they had given to the American to somebody else, and that is why the army would have sent their messenger, and maybe this messenger had come to arrest Dr. Sadao, and she became very frightened. Her hands went weak and she could not draw her breath. The servants must have told already. She thought that maybe the servants had told all these things to somebody out. And she ran to Sadao, gasping. Now, gasping means she was really out of breath and unable to utter a word. She could not speak. She was so terrified, but she ran to Dr. Sadao. But by then, the messenger had simply followed her through the garden, and there he stood. But when she actually reached her husband, she noticed that the messenger was already at the door. She pointed at him helplessly. Sadao looked up from his book. Means Sadao was reading a book and he noticed that somebody was at the threshold, at the door. He was in his office, the other partition of which was thrown open to the garden for the southern sunshine. What was it? He asked the messenger, and then he rose, seeing the man's uniform. He noticed that some messenger had come and he came in official uniform. So he asked him why he had come. The messenger said, "You are to come to the palace. The general is in pain again." Means why Dr. Sadao was being called? Because the old general was in pain, and Dr. Sadao was the surgeon, was the doctor who was looking after the old general. So that is why he was asked to come to the palace. Because why he had to go to the palace? Because the general was in pain again and he had called him. Oh, Hannah breathed. Now Hannah came to know that what she thought, why that messenger had come, the purpose was something else. Is that all? She said. मतलब यही इतनी सी बात है. She asked the messenger, and the messenger said, "All? Is it not enough?" "Indeed it is," she replied. "I am very sorry." And then she came to know that maybe Only for this reason the messenger had come, and whatever she was thinking, whatever was thought by Hana, it was incorrect. When Dr. Sadao came to say goodbye, she was in the kitchen but doing nothing. The children were asleep and he sat merely resting for a moment, more exhausted from her fright than from work. And then what actually happened? Dr. Sadao wanted to say goodbye to Hana because he had to go with the messenger to visit the general, because general was in pain, and Dr. Sadao's, you can say, Dr. Sadao had to look after the old general as a doctor, and he came and wanted to give farewell to, or maybe he wanted to say goodbye to his wife, and he wanted to go away. This is the end of page number 39. From tomorrow we are going to continue with page number 40. Till then, take a very good care of yourself. Stay safe. Thank you very much. Keep learning. Goodbye.